If you're approaching retirement and you've built up a decent 401k, there's a moment that kind of catches a lot of people off guard. You stopped working, you're looking at this account and you're thinking to yourself, what do I do with this now? Do you leave it where it is? Do you roll it into an IRA? Do you start Roth conversions? Do you need to make withdrawals? And what about taxes? Because here's the part that most people forget. Your 401k plan doesn't come with a retirement plan attached to it. It's just an account. And what you do with it next will have a meaningful impact on your taxes, your income, and how long that money lasts. So today I want to walk you through what actually happens to your 401k when you retire, the main options that are available to you, as well as the key trade-offs that most people don't think about until much later. That 401k that you've been saving for throughout your career gets you to retirement, but a plan will take you through it. Before retirement, a 401k is pretty simple, right? You make contributions, hopefully your employer is making a contribution, and the account is going to grow over time. At least that's the goal. But once you retire, the purpose of that account will start to change, right? You go from a growth vehicle to an income source, okay? So, no longer are you trying to grow that account as much as you can. Now it's your biggest asset, and you need to decide how you're going to be pulling from that to get your income. And that shift is where a lot of confusion happens, because your 401k isn't going to turn into a paycheck automatically. You have to decide how much to withdraw, when to withdraw it, and how those withdrawals are going to impact taxes. And that's important because most 401ks are pre-tax accounts, which means that any dollar that you take out is going to be taxed based off of your income. The reason I say most 401k accounts are pre-tax accounts is because that Roth plan wasn't introduced until 1998, and a lot of employers still haven't accepted that. And so it's not in their plan. A lot of people don't have a Roth 401k. And so a lot of people retiring right now, a ton or all of their assets are focused in a pre-tax 401k or a pre-tax IRA. So that account balance you see in your pre-tax 401k isn't necessarily the money that you get to spend, because you still owe taxes on that money. So what can you actually do with your 401k? What are your options? When people retire, there are typically four main paths that people consider for their 401k. Option one being leave it in there. You can often leave your money in your employer's plan, especially if the plan allows for it and if it meets the minimum thresholds. This will keep things simple and easy. You don't have to transfer your money anywhere. It just stays where it is. But if you do keep your money in the plan, then you kind of give up a little bit of your control, right? I mean, it's still your money. You can still take it out whenever, but now you still have to get employer approval anytime you make a withdrawal, so it's just extra paperwork, as well as they have the opportunity to change providers, which will then in turn probably change some of your investments too. Option two, roll your 401k into an IRA. This is one of the more common options. Rolling over your 401k gives you more investment flexibility. There's a lot more investments within an IRA than there are within the scope of a 401k. Also, you get to manage your withdrawals a little bit more closely, and it often offers more planning options. But it also means that you're in charge of managing it, or your financial advisor is in charge of managing it. As a fiduciary advisor, this option makes the most sense to me. Mainly, why would you keep your 401k inside the employer plan? You're giving away your control, and also any investments that you have inside there that you're in love with, they've been treating you good for the last 30 plus years, you can also get within your IRA. Option three, move it to a new employer plan. This one's a bit less common, mainly because once you retire, you want to stay retired. I know that a lot of people will get, side jobs, or maybe they'll start doing a hobby that makes them money, but this is also an option. You can move from one employer plan to another employer plan. You would also have the opportunity to, move it into an IRA if you do continue to work, for the same reason as option two. It gives you a little bit more independence, more flexibility. You're able to do what you want with it, and also you can still make withdrawals even while you're still working. Option four, start withdrawing. Once you retire, you can start taking withdrawals as needed. You finally made it to the promised land. You can start making withdrawals and start living the life in retirement that you've wanted. But this is where things start to become more complex, because withdrawals are going to affect your taxable income, your Social Security taxation, and your Medicare premiums down the road, which is why if you start to make withdrawals, you want to make sure that you have a plan, right? You want to turn these challenges into opportunities through your withdrawal strategy. Now let's go over the tax side of it, which is where most mistakes happen. This is where 401k decisions really start to matter because, like I said earlier, most 401k accounts are generally tax deferred. They're pre-tax, meaning that taxes haven't been paid on it yet. That means when you take money out, it's generally going to be taxed as income, and there are a few key timing factors to be aware of. First, if you withdraw money before age 59 and a half, there will be penalties. There's an IRS 10% tax penalty on any withdrawal made before age 59 and a half. There are some exceptions to that rule, the most common being disability. So if you qualify for a certain disability, you may be exempt of that 10% penalty. Second, at some point, the IRS is going to require you to start taking money out of your plan. And this is called required minimum distributions, or you've probably heard of them referred to as RMDs. And generally, according to today's rule, you have to start taking your RMDs at age 73. Essentially, IRS is taking the power out of your hands and telling you when you get to take those withdrawals instead of you telling yourself, this is when I want to take them. And this is where a lot of people get surprised. And I know most people will go into retirement thinking that they'll be in a lower tax bracket, mainly because they're not making a salary anymore, so their income's going to be lower. But if you have Social Security coming through, maybe you have a pension, or maybe you have income coming from elsewhere, RMDs will tend to put you into the same tax bracket that you were while you're working, or in some cases, even in a higher one. I've said this in multiple videos in the past, and I'll continue saying it to all my clients. Taxes do not show up all at once. They stack. One of the biggest misunderstandings around 401ks is people will think that income will just turn on, right? It'll act as a pension. They don't have to worry about it. They can just go and take income out, or, it's going to be given to them in the, sense of dividends kind of. But it doesn't. You have to create a plan. You have to decide how much you're going to withdraw every single year and where that money is going to be coming from. What accounts will I be pulling from? And then you have to adjust your plan over time. Research has shown that a lot of retirees have difficulty with this transition because you're shifting from saving to spending. And that's a transition that's very difficult to overcome, which is why this is where planning becomes critical. Because if you end up spending too much early on, then it creates problems down the road. And in turn, if you spend too less, then you're just kind of creating unnecessary stress on yourself. Income in retirement isn't automatic, it's designed. There aren't any cookie cutter portfolios where you can just plop yourself in and hope for the best, right? What worked for somebody else might not work for you. And if it does, it might be lucky. And who wants to plan their money around luck? Now let's focus on the big mistakes, what a lot of people will get wrong. There are a few common mistakes that I see a lot of people make when it comes to their 401k. First off, it would be, just treating their retirement plan as a checking account. They have an expense here, they have an expense there. Oh, just take it out of the IRA, we're good for it. Well, if you keep on doing that and you don't necessarily plan for these expenses or plan around what your annual income should be in retirement, then it's going to create stress down the road, and hopefully you're not overspending your portfolio or your account. Second, ignoring taxes until later. This is absolutely detrimental to anybody's retirement plan. If you just say, it's down the road, I don't need to worry about RMDs, I don't need to worry about what my Social Security tax is going to be if my income is too high. No, these are things that you need to think about because nobody just wants to pay excess taxes. Sure, it might be the easy way out. I don't need to worry about it right now because I have the money to pay for it. But at the end of the day, who wants to pay the IRS? Nobody. You want to keep your money. So if you have a thoughtful plan that kind of goes over the tax impact of what your retirement looks like, then you'll be a lot better situated than you would be if you didn't think about it. Third, waiting too long to plan. A lot of people will come into my office, they're already retired, they have their retirement accounts that they've been pulling out of, and now they're getting into the years where RMDs are starting to become a problem, or Social Security taxes are becoming a problem because they have too much income. These are things that you can often avoid. Sure, there are things that we can do to kind of help mitigate or minimize those taxes, but at that point, it's almost too late, right? You want to make sure that you're planning for these situations so that you can avoid challenges later on. And lastly is assuming that everything will figure itself out. It won't, mainly because withdrawals, taxes, and timing, they all go hand in hand together. One needs to be talking to the other. All three need to be having a conversation with each other. If one is put out of the conversation, then it's going to start resenting you, and that's where problems start to happen, right? Hopefully that doesn't sound familiar. But you need to make sure that all of these things are coordinating, okay? Your plan needs to be cohesive. It needs to flow. The biggest retirement mistakes usually aren't dramatic. They're just unplanned. So what's the bigger picture? Instead of focusing only on what the account can do itself, the better question is, how does this 401k fit into the overall plan? Because what's really going to matter is your total income picture, your tax strategy, your timeline, and your flexibility. Two people can have the exact same 401k balance and end up with completely different retirement outcomes depending on how they structure those pieces. Which brings me back to what I was saying earlier about cookie cutter portfolios. What works for one person might not work for you. It's not about the account. It's about the system around it. So if you're approaching retirement and wondering what you need to do with your 401k, here's the perspective that I would keep in mind. There isn't one universally known right move, right? There's no one size fits all. There are trade-offs. Leaving it, rolling it over, withdrawing from it can all make sense depending on your situation. The key is understanding how these decisions affect your taxes, your income, and your long-term flexibility. Because the goal isn't just managing your account, it's turning it into a plan that actually works for you. A good retirement plan doesn't start with the account. It starts with the outcome. What do you want out of this plan? What do you want out of retirement? Thank you for coming to today's episode of Tommy 2 Cents. As a reminder, if you ever want to grab some time with me or walk me through your specific situation, there's a link below. Feel free to click on it and select a time to meet. Happy to help in however I can. And I will see you in the next episode. Take it easy.